morning. Beloved, let us love one another, because love is from God, and everyone who loves is born of God. God is love. Certainly in Unity, we know that God is love, not a being who loves, but that God is the essence of love itself. So this morning, as we do turn our thoughts toward Martin Luther King, we join with others around the nation and indeed around the world in a hope and an expectation that we live into what Martin Luther King termed the beloved community. One that is grounded and rooted in this understanding that we are to love one another because we are loving from the impulse of that which is the truth of who and what we are. That God is love, and we are born of love, and in truth we are love. And so as we remember Martin Luther King this morning on the eve of Martin Luther King Day, God is love, let us remember that he was a prophet who spoke boldly about the transformative power of love. So what is the beloved community? Dr. King said that the purpose of his work was to create a beloved community, which will require a qualitative change in our souls and a quantitative change in our lives. So what is the beloved community? Not only did he challenge the world to set the realization of the beloved community as its intention, but he also challenged us to pay attention to all the things that were out of alignment with or incongruent with that vision. He asked us to learn to relate to one another in a different way and to pay attention to unjust systems, to all the symptoms of the human consciousness that pointed to an incongruence with the understanding that we are here to love one another. Intention and attention are partners in the work of transformation. Not only must we cast a goal or a vision, an intention out in front of us, but again, we must pay attention to our thoughts, our beliefs, our attitudes, our behaviors that are incongruent, that are out of alignment with that intention. And this is just what Dr. King means when he says that the realization of the beloved community will require a qualitative change in our souls as well as a quantitative change in our lives. Our soul is our consciousness. It is the sum total of our beliefs, our thoughts, our attitudes. Our consciousness, just like the power of faith, as I mentioned last Sunday, is pivotal. It can either be molded and shaped and directed as it turns toward that higher mind, that higher consciousness that is the spirit within us, our divine nature, or it can allow itself to pivot so fully outward that it is shaped and formed by the conditions of the world around it, which includes prejudices, discrimination, biases. And so a qualitative change to our souls comes about as we begin to set an intention to love and to live into the beloved community. And as we pay attention to all the ways, the beliefs, the attitudes, the thoughts, the internal material, the way that we show up in the world, perhaps that is out of alignment with that intention. So intention is one that is rooted in love, particularly. And if it is, everything else becomes rightly ordered. For it grounds us in our spiritual nature, and it keeps us focused on our goal as we live into the beloved community. Now, for Dr. King, the beloved community was not some sort of utopian fantasy, where if we arrived into that place, everything would just be perfect, everyone would get along. He was realistic. But at the heart of it was always love, a grounding in respect and compassion, so that differences could be met and tensions could be resolved in ways that were creative and healing and transformative. Jesus spoke of the beloved community as well, but he called it the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven. In his book, Discover the Power Within You, Eric Butterworth does something that I like to do, and that's to look at the etymology, the root meaning of the Greek words in the New Testament. And the word heaven comes from a Greek word, uranos, which means to expand or expansion. So Jesus also understood that the kingdom of heaven was a space, a consciousness, in which, as those of us who were intentional about its realization, would come together to expand our hearts, to expand our minds, to expand our consciousness, so that it begins to draw that circle of love wider and wider and wider until all of creation is embraced. So we are living into the beloved community as we allow the power of divine love to expand us, to grow us, to stretch us. So how do we do this? Well, this morning I'd like to look at 4 ideas directly from Dr. King's vision for living into or the creation of the beloved community. The first is, the beloved community is marked by radical inclusion. The beloved community is marked by radical inclusion. Well, the word radical, well, sometimes we think of that as, well, somewhat radical, right? Fanatical, zealous, rabid, a revolutionary. But the word comes, again, the root word, comes from the Latin word that is the same root as the word radish. You never knew that a radish and a radical had something in common, did you? Radix, which means root or rooted. The use of the word to connote extremism is a relatively new occurrence, just from the 18th century. Originally, the word radical meant someone who returned to their roots, that was grounded in something. So when Martin Luther King calls Jesus an extremist for love, which he did, he is saying that Jesus is rooted and grounded in the divine love that it is as at the core of his very being. So what does radical inclusion mean? For me, this means that you welcome everyone into your sphere, no matter one's race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, rich, poor, everyone. And certainly that is the beauty of a Unity Center. This is a space and a place in which we honor and respect diversity and all of its magnificence, right? Amen. But what about those people I meet who don't share the same political or social or theological views that I do? Do I include them in my vision for the beloved community? Yes. Jesus challenged us to love those who hate us. Now, Radical inclusion does not mean that there aren't non-negotiable boundaries for behavior. We need to assure that there are safe spaces and places for those who've been wounded by some of these same folks, perhaps. But Dr. King's vision of the beloved community was intentional about creating a space for the healing power of divine love. Charles Fillmore talked about this as well. Dr. King says love is the creative, redemptive, transforming power of the universe. And this is Charles Fillmore's definition of redemption, the process through which our lesser self is brought into alignment or congruence with our higher self. So as we love even those who don't think like we do, that don't vote like we do, who don't hold the same values as we do, we are providing a space for transformation and for redemption. So this brings us back to the original meaning of radical. We are to be rooted in love to provide the space for healing and transformation, for reconciliation and mercy and justice. For Dr. King called us to know, returning violence for violence multiplies violence, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Returning violence for violence multiplies violence. The next characteristic of the beloved community is the recognition of the image of God in every human being. And I will add, in all of creation. Can you imagine, I think I asked this question a couple of weeks ago, the transformation that would be wrought if we would recognize the presence of God, the image of God in one another? How can you harm another if you truly understand that he or she is holy and sacred and divine? One of the areas of study in theology is theological anthropology, and simply that means the study of the nature of humankind and our relationship with God. And Dr. King's theological anthropology was simply this, and it was that which rooted and grounded all of his work and made the civil rights movement possible. That everyone is created in the image and likeness of God. That all of us, in Dr. King's words, bear that image within us. In unity, we would say that this image is the truth of us. And we need that commitment, especially now. The third characteristic of the beloved community is to speak the truth in love. In Macon, Georgia, where I just came from, I served on the organizing committee for a program of Mercer University called the Beloved Community Symposium. I sat with committee members who were members of the faculty at Mercer University and staff members and the chaplain of that university, as well as several clergy and community leaders. And I will tell you, it was a tremendously diverse group, racially and theologically. We organized the Beloved Community Symposium each year in February, inviting speakers to present their work, mostly theologians and scholars, to come and present their work on racial reconciliation, justice, and healing. Macon, Georgia is about 60% African American, and there is a long and painful history of segregation, discrimination, the horrors and the terror of the Jim Crow era, and systemic injustice and poverty. One of the speakers A couple of years ago, Sung Chan Ra, a theologian and professor not far from here at North Park University in Chicago, wrote a book entitled Prophetic Lament. He uses the book of Lamentations in the Hebrew Scriptures as well as the Psalms to demonstrate the power of speaking truth in love. He says, sometimes praise and celebration are the most beautiful things in the world, but sometimes they are just a veneer, a blanket hiding deeper truth and brokenness. Sometimes the hardest thing in the world is to face the truth. Lament teaches us that facing the truth can hurt, but through the rivers of truth, tears can turn to hope. So the beloved community includes the catharsis of truth-telling, but it also requires that we do so in love. And the beloved community is built on love. Not just any love, but as Dr. King said, the love of God operating in and through the human heart. And sometimes we need to speak the truth. We need to speak the truth in love to power, to one another, and most often to ourselves. But we do so with love and respect, honor and compassion. Lastly, the fourth characteristic. We live into the beloved community as we blend faith and action. Our Quakers brothers and sisters have this wonderful saying that we need to put feet on our prayers. It's a wonderful thing to pray. And certainly we know in Unity that prayer is transformative, that prayer is an energy that moves into the world to heal it and to transform it. And so in Unity, our prayers are effectual. There is a power to our prayer. But we need to put feet on those prayers at times. We need to put some skin on those prayers and to do the work that we are called to do to be that transformative presence in the world. To set an intention to open ourselves up to the beloved community so that we can live into it. And to pay attention to the ways in which the world we live in, our community and the larger world, is not aligned with that intention. And once we see those spaces and those places of incongruence, then we go about the business of transforming them, of healing them, bringing about reconciliation. So today, on this very important day, as we gather together to celebrate this year at our annual meeting, and to do the work of this Unity Center together, let us reconnect with our intention, and let's commit ourselves to it, to welcome all, and to be rooted in that, to honor the divinity within them, to speak the truth in love, even to ourselves, to clear the space for God's healing love to do its transformative work, and to put our faith into action, so that we live into the beloved community and dwell together in love. As Psalm 133 reminds us, how very good and pleasant it is for kindred to live together in unity.